I don't want to have to feel like I have to remove the cloak of being a woman, of being maternal, of all of the things that come with being a mom. Like that is wholly my identity too. And I really want to create a world where those things exist in total harmony with one another. And some days I'm a 14-hour CEO and I'm a 6-minute mom. And some days I'm a 14-hour mom and a 6-minute CEO.
Today is very special for two reasons. One is that we have some really incredible content coming your way, but two, I'm by myself. As you can see here in this post-mortem pre-introduction, it's taken me a week to really sit with this episode, and I'm really excited about it. But Tim is selfishly out there running his agency. Yeah, I know. Complete selfish. I mean, that's really what I think about when I think about it. He's not here right now, so he can't even stop me from saying this. Really, he can't ever say like, "Oh, Marcus, cut it out. I've got a sweater vest on." Blah 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 blah. Whatever he says, what he can't say right now is the fact that every once in a while I don't run an agency. I do not. That's the secret out of the bag. Is that every once in a while, it's up to me to really drive this home, to really carry this team. Really putting agency talk on my back. If you would have, you could say that. No, I'm kidding. I feel absent. I feel half of myself when Tim isn't here for the Agency Talk podcast. But here's the promise: he is going to be on this episode. You're going to hear from him because today we get to interview and you get to hear from Tiffany Sauter, CEO of Element 3. I'd say, what were they? The Business Inc. 5000 for 6 years. Fastest growing agency in the Midwest out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And yeah, we talk a little bit about that. We talk about a little bit of how they've had all those accolades. But what we mostly talk about is our feelings, who we are, what we're trying to do, how to hold it down and keep it together as high capacity business owners. Like that is actually something that we haven't talked about now. Balance, how we get it done, how somebody like her could have 4 kids, I believe, and a successful marriage and relationships outside of work and still grow something so amazing and have an incredible team. It's almost impossible to do. So we got the opportunity to peel back those layers of the onion and find out what it takes. What is the secret? What is it about her specifically that she has done to reach these levels? And a lot of it has to do with interpersonal and a lot more going inside. And I'll tell you what, Tim and I walked away from this interview stupefied. Okay. That's a really good word. Stupefied, befuddled. Befuddled would be a good word. And I personally had to sit with it for about a week because it was fantastic. Every time that I get the opportunity to speak to my really incredible friend, Tiffany Sauter, that is what happens. She's a speaker. She's a podcast host. She's an agency owner. She's a mom. She's an incredible wife. She's a leader, and she's somebody that I admire and somebody that you will too. So without further ado, please welcome for the first time on Agency Talk, my good friend, Tiffany Sauter. Well, I am personally so excited about this episode because we have our good friend Tiffany in the house for Agency Talk. Tiffany Sauter, how are you? Oh my gosh, your microphone is amazing.
Thanks, Marcus. It's great to be here with you guys.
I've been listening to your podcast, Tiffany.
Ah.
Yeah, I've been listening to it. By the way, Tim, if we should be taking notes because Tiffany's, what are you guys in, like 100 plus episodes?
Yeah, we just crossed 100 episodes, which is very fun.
Gosh.
Oh, good for you. Cool.
And I'll tell you what, you picked a very incredible topic. And by the way, this is really funny. It's like we're already plugging the podcast, which is good. If we're already like there.
We don't need to do that.
Yeah. No, we have to, because if you're not listening to it, like what I love about it is that you've picked a topic that I feel like we don't ever really talk about in the agency world or in entrepreneurship in general. We just don't really talk about overcoming fears. I mean, I know it sounds like super woo woo because like if somebody like wants to talk to me about building a business, it's always typically an SOP and a this and that, but it's like so interesting because I feel like the agency or the business doesn't go much further than the person who is responsible for going out there and overcoming a lot of that crap. So Tim, that was my angle, was that I feel like we're way more into that space on this talk, I hope, than maybe more of our traditional, here's how you run an agency, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because I think that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, myself included,
Yeah.
selfishly want some advice on that topic and just understanding what you've had to overcome, how you did it, and why you picked that as a topic for your podcast.
Well, the name of the podcast is called Scared Confident. And the name came from I was brainstorming with some people from my creative team, just trying to find the essence of what I felt like was in the core of my own soul.
Mm.
And I felt like I was living in this sort of like perpetual state of conflict where and I'm trying to find a word picture that like explains to people what I felt, but it was like all of my dreams I could see so vividly, yet they were in a straitjacket. And I
Mm.
couldn't get them out. And I am a dreamer. Marcus and I know each other a little bit professionally. I think we feel like we know each other personally because
I
we follow each
know.
other on social media.
Yeah.
Um, but you also are a creator, you're a dreamer. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes, for me at least, those dreams were scary, first to admit to myself that I had. And then I was afraid of what other people would say if I said, this is what is in my heart to go make. This is what is in my heart to go create. And I I started the project in 2020, and I had been handed a lot of things I didn't expect. And I think I've been a leader since I was 25. I've been a business owner for almost 20 years.
Mm.
And so that means I should be living in a world I've mostly created for myself if you've been making your own decisions since you were 25.
Yep.
But I wasn't. I was starting to see the agency was moving to a place where it was starting to become really capable. And so my role was changing. There was a really unhealthy place, but I got a lot of attention for it when the agency was my identity.
Hmm.
And I was its in a lot of way. And we worked through the company becoming Element 3 and not Tiffany is Element 3.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of a lonely place. At 40, I had my fourth daughter, and our fourth daughter, and that was a very unexpected place. And I was leading through a crisis that none of us asked for.
Hmm.
And I was feeling the sort of extreme extent of those dreams in a straitjacket. And I think the great thing about sort of practicing entrepreneurship from so many years is that I've learned to sort of run into the roar. And I was like, if I can just stick my head in the lion's mouth, I'm going to figure out what the heck this whole thing is once and for all.
I notice these things about Tim. Just by the way, we have such an interesting dynamic, but I always notice when Tim's heart explodes. So when you said run into the roar, Tim just
100%.
I just I knew it.
I'm
I knew
like,
it.
that's just so aha. I mean, that's amazing. And I think that's something you train yourself to do, right?
Hmm.
Because
Totally.
originally the lion is pretty scary.
Yep.
And I think running into the roar is such a fabulous way to frame that. It really is. And I think if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to explore that, that those next steps, and those can be loud and ugly sometimes. And I think running into it is such a fascinating way to look at it.
I want to know Tiffany, little Tiffany, like, was that always, were you always like this adventurous run toward the roar, or was there situationally things that happened? Was it being a mom of four? What was the catalyst in that kind of pursuit?
I don't think it's always been natural to me. Actually, one of my observations, somebody said this to me because I sometimes get really self conscious about the things I think I know because I'm not a researcher. I'm like, I should have data or something if people are going to ask for my opinion, but I don't. And they said there's researchers and there's observers, and I'm an observer.
Hmm.
And so, and because I've been my own boss since I was 25 years old, the way I have learned about what I want to be like is by like watching people that I'm like, I want my space to feel like you in some
Hmm.
way. And I like watch from them. I talk to them. I don't really learn by reading. um, but if I can get in their space, I can sort of like decode it a little bit. And so I really do feel like I've sort of like collected these vignettes that become coaches in my mind about the way I remember things.
Life is a quilt, and you make it square by square. And I think if you've got that mindset of knowing exactly what you want out of every square to stitch that together, it just becomes a great tapestry. I think it's awesome. I love that. As you're talking about your journey, um, there's so many similarities in what you've said, but I think we're literally polar opposite. Um, I'm not fearful because I'm not as smart as you are. I just plow ahead, and I'm going to get it done. How does that mindset manifest itself with your team?
At Element 3, we've codified our purpose is to foster growth in people and business so they can change the world. And it's not about we're building this business so that we as a company can change the world. It's that like business is a training ground for life, and it has the great advantage of a monthly scoreboard. And so
Mm,
we all get to know if we're winning or losing. Are we and it's all the soft skills that sort of lead you to the success or not. Those are the leading indicators. Are we dealing with conflict well? Are we resourcing things? Are we solving quickly? Are we talking about the real issue? Are we like we've all been around teams long enough. When teams have momentum, they win. They figure hard things and simple things out very fast. And
mhm.
when you don't have that culture part right, then the smallest thing is so difficult. Everybody wants to sort of die, on the start line. And so, um, fostering growth in people and business so that they can change the world is what we're all about. And so that I say purpose building, brand building, that's sort of the only thing I know how to do as a marketer. It's taking what's intuitive to the leader and making it explicit to the organization. And so I think when you think about those tools like purpose, mission, goals, some of those things. And so that's the way we've codified this thing that is just in me. It's like when I was built, that was like put in the envelope of ingredients of who I was going to become.
Yep.
And it's my job, I think, to create the language so that it becomes explicitly part of the way I'm expecting our leaders to lead.
So is this individual purpose or is this company purpose for your leadership team? And I just want to say that maybe those are the same thing. I just want to know, is there any kind of difference between those two things?
I think in the places I'm most confident with people who work for us, I know that those two things are very aligned.
Hmm.
I know that I understand their personal purpose and that we've either implicitly or explicitly gone through the exercise of understanding how where they want to get in life. Element 3 sort of is in is on the monopoly board for them.
Like, it's really interesting in the hiring process to think about it that way. It's like I look for people who have a personal purpose. I'll say it that way. I actually am very attracted to people coming in, even if it was like, hey, your purpose in life is going to take you away from my business eventually, because
Mhm.
I'm actually
Love
okay
that.
with that. Like, I remember having a guy who was like, I'm going to go sail the whole world with my wife. And I'm like, well, when's that happening? Like, I
Mhm.
want to like, and it's like, years. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then the one thing he said to me, which is really interesting about it, he's like, I know that might seem fearful that I'm just going to up and leave one day. He goes, but actually, it costs a lot of money to have a boat. And so I have to
Mhm.
do really well at my job in sales to get there. And I'm looking for this. But it
Mhm.
was a really interesting way to think about it when it's funny that popped in my mind when you said that. It's like some people are really kind of like have an idea of what they want to do and they come in and that's very attractive.
Mhm.
And then because you can see their purpose and does it align with ours. And then there are other people who might not actually have one, but your purpose is the reason why they're attracted to you.
I
Mm,
think you're right that sometimes the halo of our overall energy of sort of competitive growth is attractive to people who sort of have winning in their bones, but
Hmm.
they don't know how to sort of articulate to themselves yet how they want that to actually play out in their life. And I think you're right. If we don't help them sort of fill in the other side of the card, so to speak, that
Yeah.
it is going to peter out because you only win, for the outside for an organization so long. I think there's some a
Right.
really actually meaningful insight for me in that.
I think all of this is getting ready to tie into this next bucket that I've been dying to talk to you about. Because, Tim, how many kids you have that you know about? What is it, two still?
yeah.
So it's Tim.
My son
People,
works
can, I
with
can't.
me, and my daughter's getting
Yeah.
married next weekend.
Yeah, exactly. It was a joke. Tim knows how many kids he has. So Tim has two. I've got two girls and counting, and you've got four girls, Tiffany, four. And so one thing that I remember listening to was that you have a lot of different purposes in life. I think it's very interesting because I feel like you have like a centralized purpose which you just articulated very well. But I think that you have different roles within your purpose.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people, especially in the agency world that we've spoken to, find a lot of imbalance. And we have never talked about it on Agency Talk podcast. We rarely talk about like the
Right.
actual balance it takes to do all of those things to some level of good and still somehow have a business that exists, right? Because every time that I would go pull a lever and be amazing in my work, usually my marriage is suffering. Or if I'm really great at home, then like I'm missing a bunch of stuff at work. And so for people that seemingly do it or have found some kind of balance in it. I would love to hear your approach to that. And were you always good at it? Were you crap at it? Did it fall apart? Did you put it back together? I just want to hear a little bit about that. I know there's a lot of people on here that benefit from it.
So I'll answer that in two ways. One is I did learn the hard way. I would say I tend to play life a little bit through it's like bumper cars. Like I go really hard until I hit the wall, and then I'm like, oh no, now what direction should I go? And I pushed my marriage really hard. Let's say my husband and I both did push our marriage to the edge, and we had a real moment where we had to decide whether we were gonna put the energy in to figure out if we could put the pieces back together and rebuild it in a way that was worked for both of us, or if it was like the outcome neither one of us wanted and that we were going to get divorced. Like we were there. My husband and I have been married for 17 years, but we have had to work really hard for some of those years. I remember the world in very small snippets, and this is the way I'll package the advice. And that is that the relationships that are getting your excuses are the relationships that you are sacrificing. So if I look back into some of the years where I was really crushing it at Element 3, and it was really, if I'm honest with myself, my first love, it was nothing for me to say, like, I'm so sorry. I knew I meant I was going to be home at 6 o'clock, but I had a call or somebody walked to my office or I needed to finish a proposal or I needed to get this email out or I had to get there was an excuse, or I sat in the garage for an hour and finished up a call while, the family was trying to figure out. And, and, I I pushed our relationship really, really far because I did not understand. I did not see it physically eroding in front of me, but that's what was happening. And so I think that I'm passionate about facing the brutal facts, because if we had done that earlier, if we'd had the courage to say to each other what we were really feeling, we would have had more excellent years in our marriage. Our marriage is a 10 now. If you listen to my podcast, we'll say we were a 5. But it goes through seasons, but our heart intimacy, our closeness, our the solidness of our relationship is a 10 now. Sometimes he's still a 5, cuz he bugs me. But our commitment to our marriage, and he would say the same about me, is a 10. We're solid on it. But it took rebuilding the tenets of it, of resetting expectations, of getting really explicit with one another about what are my expectations of you? And could we or would we be willing to hold up our end of that? And we were too immature to believe that we were going to be able to get all the way through it to the end, whatever the heck the end was, without really talking and working through what it was going to require to sort of face the pressure that we were going to put on our marriage. My husband has a huge career. He went to Princeton. He played football there. He in his own right is a beast. And we both have huge dreams. And so figuring out how we're going to have 4 children, a marriage we're proud of, a community that we invest in, an extended family that gets the time that we want and they need from us. We did not have the maturity to know how to say, we got to stop and figure this out. And now we know, my husband took a new job last July, and we knew this is a timeout moment. We need to look at each other and say, what do we predict the next year is going to look like for your calendar? What is that going to require from me? Can I commit to those changes? Do we need a different care? How do we talk about it instead of just react to the emotion and the disappointment and the hurt and the loneliness and the fear and all the things that are actually going on with conflict? That's not productive for anyone. And so we have such a better set of tools now. My husband and I went to it's like my husband joked when we were pulling up, is like juvie for marriages is called Hope Restored. And it was a 4 or 5 day intensive, and it completely changed the trajectory of our relationship. And the tools that we had and the words that we could use to one another to explain what we needed. And I'm so grateful for that moment of crisis because it required that to get our attention. And I'm 40, almost 42 now. And I think sometimes it takes a second marriage for people to sort of go in with sort of a heart and attitude of maturity. I'm grateful that we were able to sort of heal and get through that so that our second marriage can be to the same person. But it really is that in a lot of ways, second marriage to the same person. And so the advice I would give is, watch who's getting your excuses, because that's the relationships that you're sacrificing. If you're giving them excuses, there's a sign to me when I'm in that pattern that I know I'm not meeting essentially like the service level agreement we've put in place, but
Mhm.
I'm not willing to say, "Hey, I've totally screwed up, and so I own that, and these are the changes I'm gonna make." I just, like, excuse away,
Mhm. Yep.
and that just erodes your relationship, and then you start backing up, and then you decide to care a little less, and then you sort of test their commitment, and then they fail, and then you back up a little further, and it's like it's crazy, it's terrible. And it takes a ton of emotional and mental capacity when your marriage is in a terrible place.
And that support is unbelievably important. So, I guess we're t- identifying our ages now. So, my wife and I have been married for 36 years, and we've known each other for 40. And she's not in business, and she was a guidance counselor her
Mm,
whole career. So we didn't have that competitive, well, I need to be there till 8 o'clock tonight, and you can be there till 8 o'clock tomorrow night. That's
mhm,
a much, I think, harder environment, to
mhm,
work in. The conversations that Kim and I would have is like, okay, you sell ads and I help kids. So what would you like to talk about?
mhm,
So I think ultimately it comes down to balance, and it comes down to being balanced, and having somebody tell you when you're out of alignment.
Mhm.
Hey, you need to take some time because you are, and we've always looked at it as, if our universe is aligned, then our extended universe is going to be as well. And so it's those times you go back and you recreate that balance, because driving your agency, or a place like Conduit, is very difficult when you're not aligned and when you're out of balance.
mhm.
So
Mm.
I love the way you framed that. That's awesome.
Tiffany, thanks for sharing that, by the
Mhm.
way. That's not even, like I think this story is on Good Morning America, so it's not like people don't know this about me, which is just like, thank you for posting that article. But I literally like almost lost my marriage, my family, worked myself out of a great situation,
Mhm.
and I think it takes a lot of courage to face that. We talked about from the beginning of our conversation, like running toward the roar. And I think that it's funny because I think this is obviously a business podcast, but I think that interpersonal part of it floods over, like it's a watershed moment into your business, right? Like the willingness to go face that. Like my wife, if we're talking about partners here and how this whole thing, my wife is a neuroscientist, okay, and who deals with chronic pain through like emotional work and deep emotional work and rewiring your neural pathways, like all this stuff I don't understand. But what's funny is like I can't stub my toe in my house. Like I literally like will hurt myself, and she'll go, I think that we need to talk about your childhood. It's like, I can't. I'm like, no, I literally cut my finger off. She's like, no, that pain you're feeling is actually a defense mechanism. I'm like, no, I fell out of the
Wow.
bathtub. So I think what's interesting is like all the things that you're willing to run into, like the actual conflict is a good thing. Like we have completely mispackaged the idea of pain or conflict, or the fact that, a lot of this is very refining fire stuff that we're talking about. And I think a lot of people have to go through that because I think it's an interesting place to be in the, like, gosh, forced humility. I've had to sit on my butt many times in those interpersonal relationships that I've hurt during running and gunning after all those amazing things that I thought I was going after for those people, by the
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
What a lie that is. I think that's an interesting thing. And I'm just very thankful that you would vulnerably share that, because I think a lot of agency owners and business owners who listen to this podcast or will stumble across this probably are dealing with a lot of those imbalances. So that's so helpful to be able to see, one, that you're running toward it, and that's really important. And then two, that the part that like the early indicators, like I always laugh. It's like, where's the you're running out of gas light coming on? Like, what are those? I want to know all of those, right?
Mhm.
So let me ask you that question then. So maybe we'll just say this and then maybe one more thing and we'll finally let you go. I feel like we've just like stolen all of your time. What are some of the early indicators that people should be paying attention to in their agency life when they're running it, that it's headed toward a place where they run out of gas, if that makes sense?
If you're gonna look at one place in your organization about whether or not you're gonna be able to make it to your defined finish line, I think I could predict the trajectory of an agency by going in and sitting in a leadership team and seeing how aligned they are, and whether or not the way that they talk about the agency's problems and where it's going has similar like overtones, or if they're all looking in different directions. Um, that's the
that's good.
place I most know whether we'll solve towards one another or if we're solving away.
What do you think about that, Tim? Tim's nodding, but I know his
I'm
internal
just dropping
dialogue
the
is like,
mic on that.
I
I
know
think that's
we have
awesome.
mics that we can't even drop
Yeah,
over here for
I
people
know.
that are listening and can't see us. It's just like we all have these really fancy mics
Yeah.
that are somewhere. I do have one last question, which we'll kind of maybe wrap this up a second here. And I don't mean to open this because this could be like a whole other 40-minute podcast. But
Okay, I'll be brief. I promise.
I cannot have you on here without asking you this question. You have created many seats at many tables for yourself. And I want to say that as a friend looking in at your life. I feel like you have definitely had to fight for a lot of the things that you have in your success. It's not like success came knocking at your door, right? And I wanted to talk about this because I think that like we just had a few other agency owners on here. It's a very male dominated space, like period, just as in the agency world. Tell us a little bit about that in terms of your journey, just really quickly, about an encouragement for maybe there are other women out there who want to go start their own agency, and like some of the things that you could say about navigating that, things you've learned, or any words of wisdom there, because I think it's a real opportunity here that we can use the platform to be able to talk about this. And I think that I've just been so impressed by your journey and how you've, kind of carved things out for yourself. And maybe it'll be a little easier for someone else coming behind you.
Honestly, today being a woman is a competitive advantage. I don't know if we can say that, but I feel that way. That I think there's a lot of people rooting for women to be able to figure out how to live a life of and that we're all really proud of. And I think there's a lot of I don't know. I think there's a lot that women have to offer the workplace. And so finding a way that can happen. But I don't want to have to feel like I have to remove the cloak of being a woman, of being maternal, of all of the things that come with being a mom. Like that is wholly my identity too. And I really want to create a world where those things exist in total harmony with one another. And some days I'm a 14-hour CEO and I'm a 6-minute mom. And some days I'm a 14-hour mom and a 6-minute CEO. And that's just what the sort of schedule calls for. And I'm really comfortable with the fact that that's how it goes down sometimes. And I think that we cannot paint a picture that you get to where I am without creating some really intentional choices with what gets your time. And I think that you have to then sort of own the life that your choices have sort of gotten for you. And so, there is certainly probably another podcast there, but it does take choices.
I love 14 minutes, 14-hour mom, 6-minute CEO, and vice versa on any given day. And I think first of all, thank you for coming on, because I think you shared so much of what we've really not talked an awful lot about, which is, you being your authentic self and creating an agency that has its purpose and your purpose aligned. And I think the conversation is fascinating. I wrote mentally down a bunch of things that I'm going to take from this conversation. So I just want to thank you for joining us. I really do. It's not surprising to see that you're successful.
Absolutely. And Tiffany, seriously, everybody who's listening to this, you can go to agency-talk.com and check out all the ways you can connect with Tiffany and follow along with her podcast, with her life. I think you're on social media too, because I follow you on Instagram, but I don't know if you want to like plug the Instagram because I don't know. But I will say it's exciting. It's exciting to follow Tiffany, and all of her information will be there. Tiffany, you have been an awesome friend and somebody that I want to have on every podcast I ever do from now on. So please come back. Please say that you'll come back and do Tiffany 2.0 for us at some point and keep the conversation going.
Thank you both for having me on. I appreciate it a lot.
So 95% 95% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. 95% of agencies fail in general. It's not because they just lacked community or really good content. It's because they stopped. And so our hope in this is to bring really great people like Tiffany, really great people that you're going to hear in these next subsequent episodes that are about to launch, and continually put yourself at a place where you can't stop, and we won't let you. And we hope that that burnout doesn't happen because you've taken care of yourself and you find the balance and you realize that you are an agency owner and that you live in the and so we're so excited about this. I was so happy that Tiffany came on. I know Tim wanted me to reiterate just how absolutely special it is when we have people that are just as successful and amazing like Tiffany. And be sure to go on agency-talk.com and check out her page. Click on her photo and look at her podcast and check out her agency and stay in touch with her as much as you do with us. And until next time, we are just committed to bringing really great tactical practitioner-led education for agencies on this podcast. And we cannot wait to continue to share that with you. So thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Agency Talk community. We are so excited to bring this to you. And I'm saddened that you didn't get to see Tim's unbelievable vest in this recap, but fear not, he will be back. One love, AT. Thank you.